The world of Death Stranding 2 can be a lonely, lonely place. As personal as its story is this time around, the only interactions you have with non-hostiles in the game world remain almost exclusively the same imposing, judgmental holograms ready to make you empathise with food delivery guys. In fact, some of the only actual people you come across who aren't aggressively trying to take your stuff are the people doing the same thing as you, the porters. In the first game, these wanderers seemed purpose-built to assuage some of the inevitable loneliness that would build up as you traverse these desolate landscapes. It's not as if you're the only delivery guy in the UCA or Mexico or Australia, and when the world is so indifferent in its hostility towards you, seeing a friendly, if almost entirely mute face give you a thumbs up, perhaps offer you something you almost certainly don't need, is a nice reminder that there are others enduring the same way that you are. But with the sheer frequency with which I'd bump into these guys in Death Stranding 2, with multiple occurrences in which two separate groups of porters would intersect, it got me thinking, are they enduring this stuff? My only experience of them has involved them suddenly appearing out of nowhere at some prepper shelter or distribution centre, which presumably means they made a similar trek to myself, but for some reason I just never considered any of this before. How they work, how they move, how they deal with hazards and the like. I get messages from them thanking me for building shelters and bridges, but for 2 whole games now and hundreds of hours, I've never seen any evidence of them actually using the things I've built. And as I came across more and more of them, these thoughts grew into a kind of obsession, to the point that I simply had to know. I had to drop whatever I was doing, and while I couldn't know where they were coming from, I could see where they were going, completing deliveries at their pace and analysing their movements. Hell, I wanted to see if I could, if it was even possible, or if these porters just disappeared into the void after a while. Turns out, no, these are living beings that, if observed, will move from one end of the map to the other, one arduous step at a time. Steps that can be followed. And that following proved to be a far more illuminating experience than I could have imagined, illustrating not only their mechanical workings, but teaching me things about the game's philosophy and game design in general I may not have noticed otherwise, all of which made the prolonged journeys worth it. And prolonged they indeed were, seeing me spend hours of my playtime, hours of my life, following these dudes. Because the first thing you notice is that despite their status as heroes, well, it would seem that they aren't so great at their jobs. For one, even beginning this experiment took patience and careful planning, because these guys are the most easily distracted people on the goddamn planet. Perhaps it's the fact that Sam is seen as such a legend in his own right, but if these guys get even the slightest hint of your presence, their entire world seemingly comes to a complete halt, their Odradecks spinning like the tails of overexcited puppies, eager to come over and exchange likes with the Sam Porter Bridges as they live and breathe, holding out ladders and level 1 PCCs, or whatever other nonsense they feel like pulling out of their pockets. Now, something I realised too late was that if you choose to take one of their offerings, they might keep on wandering even if you get right up in their faces. But mostly, this experiment consisted of the weirdest GTA tailing mission ever, utilising Sam's stealth abilities more than I ever did against the enemies they were intended for, urging these guys forward as they seemed to wonder why they had suddenly become the subject of such a clandestine operation. But even beyond the distraction that had me wondering how viable following these porters would even be, you learned very quickly that in a game built largely around maximising efficiency, the other porters in this world, it would seem, are keen to take things in the opposite direction, almost literally in some cases. In-game text makes it clear where these guys are headed, and bear in mind that at the point I started this experiment, I had long since completed the vast array of road and monorail networks perks. My carefully planned out web of ziplines meant that I was able to fulfill deliveries at the most daunting peaks of this world in minutes. I was curious then to see how this network would be utilised by others in the world. I mean, they thank you for building infrastructure that they themselves request. They are also as mechanically adept as anyone else in the world. Like your enemies, they can run and climb should the situation call for it. They don't lack survival instinct either when caught in timefall, and although they remain slower than Sam's light jog, they do at least develop a bit of pep in their step. But when it comes to actually using the vast array of traversal options to ease their journey, utilising the things that we players all built with the explicit knowledge that we are contributing to a shared toolset, arguably the very system that defines the Strand-type non-genre, these guys are all analog, baby. Setting aside my own porter brain, envisioning all kinds of rock faces that could be climbed over, that these porters would proceed to circumnavigate in the longest way possible, in a journey towards the mechanic from one of the distribution centres, it seemed as if they actively avoided the roads and monorails that would form a pretty direct route. They seemingly adhere to the same rules that you do, requiring battery charge and the like, but won't walk along the power grid, instead wielding nothing but their trusty canes as they take the path of most resistance. In a way, it makes you realise that there's probably a reason Sam is spoken of with such reverence. A delivery that would normally have taken minutes, in the case of these journeys, saw the sun set and rise again before the destination had been reached. When this is the speed of delivery that the inhabitants of this world are used to, you get the feeling that they aren't giving out S ranks particularly liberally. But it was as I was working so hard to keep up with these guys, maintaining enough speed without alerting them, that an interesting shift in my mindset started occurring. Indeed, being in the post-game as I was, carting stuff from place to place just to get my star rating up, this slow, protracted endeavour started to become the most meaningful journey, dare I say, the most fun time I'd had with Death Stranding 2 in hours. In many ways, these trips brought me back to what Death Stranding is really about. Something that the sea of efficiencies we craft for ourselves, that Kojima has sometimes crafted for us, may have been lost. And it all came into focus, oddly, with the most basic of mechanical fundamentals, the way in which I was moving Sam forward. Indeed, with the pace at which these porters were moving, if I didn't want to end up racing ahead, I couldn't hold the left stick up all the way. Hell, I could barely move it at all. Keeping Sam in step with these guys required a delicacy of control that I hadn't been used to in a while. And in almost any other circumstance, this would be infuriating. When you think about most other games, even at their most serene and sedate, pressing up will normally have you going into at least a light jog, if not a full-on sprint, regardless of conditions or surface underfoot. Now, this isn't a judgment if you happen to run everywhere, not in the slightest, but safe to say it's not the speed at which people typically navigate the world around them. There's a reason for this in most games. Walking is rarely a central mechanic beyond getting people to and from the quote-unquote real action, and so slowing that mechanic down could be seen as holding players back. In Death Stranding, however, where movement is arguably the very core of the game, this pace becomes far more appropriate, far more representative of the consideration that tends to go into each step of a real-life hike. In short, when you've spent so long making deliveries where it's questionable if your feet will even touch the ground, when you can sail through the very tar that governs this world, this is the kind of pace that really gets you thinking again. It gets you viewing things as fundamental as distance and scale in a completely different way. At first, the idea of spending 10 to 15 full minutes walking, and in that time having barely moved past the boundary of the distribution centre, made me question my sanity in pursuing this experiment, but immediately these distribution centres, previously experienced as merely a terminal in what might as well have been otherwise empty space, making them feel functionally compact, suddenly morph into these monoliths of industry that they were always portrayed as. For me anyway, I started to imagine the labyrinth of warehouse space, whirring machinery, and life occurring behind these layers of concrete. You know, over time, through our wacky infrastructure, we perhaps begin to experience a distant cartoon of this world. Sam makes a mockery of it after a while, whereas the porters, with their boots firmly to the ground, take in every incline, every raised stone, every patch of moss. At their pace, with the mechanical effort you have to go to in order to maintain it alongside them, the world becomes tactile, real once more. After a while, when that same distribution centre starts to get smaller and smaller in your rear view, it makes that journey that should otherwise take a minute or two feel like a real achievement. 4,000 metres coffin surfed in a couple of minutes simply doesn't measure up to 400 metres walked in 15, because as is crucial to Death Stranding's philosophy, sometimes the most meaningful journeys take a little bit of effort. They take time, they require you to engage with friction. And these journeys did indeed become truly important to me, a key part of the meaning I took from the game. See, in the half-decade or so I've been familiar with the world of Death Stranding, this experiment marked the first time I'd ever actually performed a delivery with someone. They, on the other hand, always work in pairs. You almost never see a lone porter in the wild otherwise. If you do, it's because something is amiss, they're injured. And after spending some time travelling with them, you begin to see why they work this way. For a specific example, in order to reach the mechanic's desert, the porters had to cross several bodies of water, some rather gargantuan. Perhaps it was the full-grown man I happened to be carrying on my back at the time, but these were rivers I was worried I wouldn't be able to get through. And given that these porters seem to adhere to some of the same systems that I do, was there a chance that they could lose control and float away? I was genuinely impressed, for example, that they seemed to at least possess the desire to avoid the more dangerous currents rather than just plough through. It was a nice reminder of their humanity, I suppose. It was details like this that meant that as we trudged across river after river, my focus gradually moved away from the fact that we could have avoided all of these if we just walked along the road, and instead moved to genuine concern as to if these guys I didn't know were going to make it. For whatever reason, the thumbs up they gave me as I checked up on them on the other side made me feel legitimately happy. It had me feeling guilty for not having the materials on hand to build the bridge they requested earlier. All these complicated feelings for people that, as far as the game is concerned, are unimportant to the task at hand. You know, these porters, despite the hardships they experience, will even go out of their way to like structures you build. Structures they might not use themselves, but recognise the importance of. Sure, they might be inconsistent, inefficient in terms of their routing and the ways in which the game measures performance, but they more keenly represent the principles of Death Stranding, of finding meaning in a broken world through the connections we form with each other, the importance of carrying on and simply existing when the entire world feels like it's fighting you, than almost any scripted set piece that Sam might experience. And at the end of it all, these journeys would often become a coin toss as to whether the porters would actually enter the prepper shelter they were working towards, or if they'd simply glitch out and awkwardly wait outside. I found myself genuinely trying to will them along in these instances. Come on guys, we've worked so hard to get here, finish the job. It's all delightfully absurdist. I certainly didn't have any reason to be here in a systemic sense. I had no packages to drop off. I had played the game in a way that goes against incentive. And yet, I'd found a purpose and camaraderie unparalleled by even the most efficient deliveries I had performed in the 90 hours spent previously. And when we did triumphantly lay our backpacks down and rest our weary eyes after a job well done, I would always find that upon awakening, those porters, those friends, would be gone. No goodbye, no thanks, just away they go, off to whatever future deliveries and dangers await them. Perhaps a bit sudden, but maybe they got all the formalities out of the way right at the start. You know, they didn't need to stop in their tracks and give me a bunch of likes and then hand me whatever supplies they were carrying, but they did. They'd happily check to see what this doofus wanted if I happened to get too close. They went out of their way to ensure a structure I put up didn't go unappreciated. And to top it all off, they just let Sam sleep, fully aware of the toll that this job can take on each and every person who does it. Not disturbing that person from some well-earned rest is maybe the kindest thing of all. There are all kinds of mechanical observations one can make about the way the porters in this world function, but after hours tailing them, my most prevalent takeaway is that these characters, experienced by most players as a totally transient system to be swiftly forgotten about, actually exemplify that even when this cavalcade of contraptions can instantly transport you from shelter to shelter, even if it's not what the game incentivizes you to do, maybe there's value in taking the long way round and truly appreciating the majesty of the world before you alongside friends. Thank you all so much for watching. If you liked this, be sure to check out my spoiler analysis on the game uploaded a few days ago. A massive thanks as well to my patrons, who you can see on screen and are all getting access to exclusive, fully produced videos that aren't available here. Your continued support is what allows me to keep going with the work I do on this channel, and I seriously cannot express how grateful I am for that. You are all the best. Special thanks go to Ewan Patterson, David Butkus, Brendan Hess, Mason Miller, Alex O'Sullivan, Michael Tritt, Rickety Cricket, Cameron Siniceros, Charles J. Liu, Alistair Dunn, Vitautis Catharsis, Dolly Bowman, Young Condor, Danis Sikauskis, Christopher Faherty, Nicholas Villeneuve, Yogesh Deshpande, Leah Chinello, Captain Canusprick, Bryce Snyder, Seapage Melt Limited, David Björk, Timothy Jones, Matthew Grover, Shardfire, Lynn Browning, Dallas Keane, Charlie Kimball, and Charlie Yang. And with that, this has been another episode of Writing on Games. Thank you all so much for watching, stay safe, and I will see you all next time.